Before I start this video, just wanted to point out that Treyarch confirmed earlier today that early next week is when we'll be seeing our very first teaser for the DLC for Zombies map. So my fingers are crossed that it's not going to be Tuesday at 12 p.m. since it's my first day of classes for my second year of college, and it's probably the first day of school for many of you guys out there as well. But without further ado, enjoy the rest of the video. What's going on, everybody? This is dkdynamite, and today what I have for you guys is some potential breaking news here. Potential release dates for both DLC 4 or the Call of the Dead remake and DLC 5, aka Victus Chronicles. So as of lately, as I brought up in a couple of videos, a new source has reached out to me who claims to have some inside information when it comes to Black Ops 4 specifically. And as I mentioned in a previous video where I've gone over this person's information, take it with a grain of salt. I'm not passing this off as 100% legit information because, once again, we don't know the legitimacy behind this source, but I still think it's worth bringing up because if this proves to be legit, we know to trust this source in the future when it comes to making videos here on the channel. So I first asked about a potential release date for DLC 4 or the Call of the Dead remake, and this person said the following: I've heard a rumor that the release date for DLC 4 on Xbox will be October the 8th. Not sure how he found that info, but he then said, which would mean that October the 1st is the release date for PS4's DLC 4. But from a different source, I've heard a possible Thursday release date could happen as well. So I'm not sure because they are both contradicting. Now we're going to assume that the DLC 4 Call of the Dead remake doesn't release before the actual Modern Warfare beta, and that beta begins on September the 12th. We're assuming they want to give that map time to shine for the Zombies community. But for all we know, Activision could say, you know what, screw it, we don't care about Black Ops 4, just get out that final zombie map and get out the final 2 multiplayer maps as well. So if the release date's on a Thursday, who knows, we could see the map release on September the 5th, but that's very unlikely, unfortunately, as you guys might also predict. And September the 12th, the following Thursday, is the release date of the Modern Warfare beta, so those Thursdays don't work. So you never know, there's always a possibility where they release the zombie map literally in the middle of the Modern Warfare beta, so maybe September the 19th. We just don't know. But let's still stick with the rumor, as he said, that it'll release on October the 1st. It technically works and obviously goes along with a potential release day on October the 8th for Xbox, and this is a week after PlayStation's release. It kind of works, but it begs the question, why wouldn't the map just release during the start of the final operation here for Black Ops 4? And that final operation, of course, begins on September the 24th until further notice, as we could see on the actual time left for the second half of Apocalypse Z. This ends on, I believe, what was it, midnight on September the 23rd, which means September the 24th is the beginning of the new and final operation. So I'd expect, as I brought up in previous videos, for the final map, a part of the Black Ops Pass, to release with the final operation. But for all we know, Activision said, you know what, we're just going to reserve a slot for October the 1st, give Treyarch some more time to market this big Ether finale to get people out there to potentially buy the Black Ops Pass before Modern Warfare comes out. You know, you would want to give this map some time to shine before Modern Warfare fully releases and essentially puts Black Ops 4 to sleep for most of the community out there. But if we go with his other theory here, or his other rumor, as he said, that it'll release on a Thursday, there are a couple of Thursdays available, assuming they don't release it during the actual Modern Warfare beta. So you might have September the 26th, October the 3rd, and October the 10th. Those are like the 3 big Thursdays you really have before the full release of Modern Warfare. But to also support this theory about October the 1st, Mr. Rothwaffles himself may have inside knowledge and some sources that we just don't know much about. In his recent video talking about DLC 4, he did mention October the 1st as a real likely date for DLC 4. So maybe if that comes true, he'll look back on that and say, yeah, I definitely predicted that, and get more people out there to be convinced that he does have inside information.
But hey, it seems to me like October 1st is the most likely date, in my mind at least, for the DLC release, which is over a month away.
So for all we know, he could know more than, you know, we all do. He could have some different sources or some more inside knowledge about Black Ops 4, and he may know that, yes, October the 1st is a definitive date for this map. So if this other source I'm talking to here is saying October the 8th for Xbox and Milo saying October the 1st for PS4, those things line up pretty damn well. So you guys can be the judge of that down below in the comments section. But as this person I'm speaking to said, those two things that he heard are contradicting. So for all we know, they're still deciding on a final release for this map. Everything could be up in the air right now, as we've seen many times before behind the scenes with Treyarch and Black Ops 4. Lots of things are changing, agendas are changing to fit their rapid progression and development of the Black Ops 2020 reboot. So for all we know, all of this could be changed in just a week's time. But the next thing we talked about here was also in regards to this Call of the Dead remake. I asked him about the elemental scavengers. This is a rumor that I've been hearing from a few different sources here and there that I also wanted to kind of throw at him to see, what he thought about it. And he then asked me, he said, wait, how would an elemental scavenger work? And I responded, well, you know what, there are elemental ray gun Mark IIs on Alpha Omega, something along those lines, something very similar to that system. And then he said, wait, well, were there any elemental ray guns in Alpha Omega? And I'm like, technically they weren't elemental in the same way that we have elemental god hands in Ancient Evil, but they were 4 different upgrades for the ray gun Mark II. And he then responded by saying, exactly, people say the ray guns are elemental, they're not, they are just different versions, modifications to be exact. If there is a version of this wonder weapon in what I'm calling Extincti and Numerium, then I don't see it being elemental. But that's assuming the wonder weapon makes a return, which it may or may not. Now, I'm not sure what Extincti and Numerium is at the time of recording this video, but if I do find out what that actually means from some other smart people in the community, I will put that definition on screen and I'll pin a comment down below in the comments section. But he then said, don't quote me on that name. It's not the actual name of DLC 4. So after that, I kind of got the idea that maybe the scavengers do return in sort of an elemental way, but more on par with the ray gun Mark IIs and Alpha Omega. So 4 different upgrades for the scavenger, not necessarily elemental upgrades, but still some type of upgrades where if you're in a 4-player co-op game, each person in that game can enjoy a different version of that wonder weapon, which I think, as I said before, is a system that works. It worked with Origins, it worked with Horizon Track. Treyarch did say that typically they don't want to repeat themselves and repeat the same systems over and over again, but when something like that works so well, especially for co-op games, they listen to that feedback in the community and they bring stuff like that back. So obviously Blood of the Dead and Classified didn't really have elemental upgrades or 4 different versions of a certain wonder weapon, but obviously in those 2 maps you could get the same wonder weapon for all 4 players directly from the mystery box, which is great. And obviously on Voyage of Despair we do have essentially 4 different Kraken upgrades based on the Catalyst. 9 didn't have any of that. We had the Death of Orion. We then have Dead of the Night, which had 3 different versions of Alistair's Foley, but the Foley itself could be acquired from the mystery box, or you can get the free one off the wall, so technically everybody in game was able to enjoy all the upgrades for the Foley itself. Then we had Ancient Evil, which obviously had 4 different god hands, which worked perfect in a co-op game. It's another system they keep bringing back with the new DLC maps. Obviously Alpha Omega, we have the ray guns, and with the Call of the Dead remake we'll have potentially what could be 4 different upgrades for the scavenger. So that would mean almost every map in this game gives players the opportunity to get their hands on one exclusive upgrade for that weapon. So it does work. I'm not really opposed to it, especially for this being what could be the final Ether map, not counting DLC 5, which probably bring back the Jet Gun, Sliquifier, Paralyzer, but this could be the last Ether map with some type of original wonder weapon. Even the Scavenger's not really original, it's still a different version of it. It's much different from the original back in 2011's Call of the Dead. Now moving on to Zombies Chronicles 2. When I asked him about a release date for that DLC 5 here in Black Ops 4, he said the following: a possible 2019 release. If things change, and I'd assume a early spring of 2020 release, so I guess similar to the first Zombies Chronicles, but the maps are finished. We're obviously getting Transit, Die Rise, and Buried, but at one point it was rumored we would receive all maps that were in Black Ops 3, including Zombies Chronicles, coming to Black Ops 4. Not sure if this will happen. Placement-wise, it's supposed to take place before and during Alpha Omega and DLC 4. So as I said before, as some more further confirmation here, DLC 5 will be filling in the gap between Alpha Omega and this Call of the Dead remake. He also asserted that, so I'm assuming you could have Transit take place maybe before or during Alpha Omega, Die Rise at some point in between Alpha Omega and DLC 4, then Buried taking place during DLC 4, and then at some point we could see Victus return in DLC 4 towards the end of the Easter egg or the ending cutscene to do something magnificent for this Ether finale. But also look at the release date here, possible winter 2019. So I think this is really dependent on a couple of things, not just, how well Modern Warfare Warfare performs, but whether or not Activision's IPs for the fourth quarter do well. If they need a big boost like they got with the first Zombies Chronicles, and they really warrant that for, you know, the ending of quarter 4, they'll definitely release a Victus Chronicles or a Zombies Chronicles 2, and they'll market it as much as they can to ensure, like the first Zombies Chronicles, it becomes one of the best-selling map packs of all time, not just for Call of Duty, but for PlayStation history as well. It would probably cost somewhere from $20 to $30, not expecting any cheaper, obviously not a part of the Black Ops Pass, but if Modern Warfare sells great, if there's no need to release this in quarter 4, they'll probably save it for maybe March to May of 2020. So kind of similar timing to the original Zombies Chronicles, but definitely right around either before or during the core marketing of the Black Ops 2020 reboot. But another theory I had in many other videos is that with the marketing of this 2020 reboot, they could say, hey, pre-order now and get your hands on Victus Chronicles for Black Ops 4. Or, you know, right after the reveal stream for the Black Ops 2020 reboot, they'll say, hey, if you guys are still playing Black Ops 4, here's DLC 5. You know, it'll cost $19.99 or $29.99. They could easily do one of those two things, but once again, it's all dependent on what Activision needs for the final quarter, or even for quarter 1 and 2 of 2020. So in terms of the first Zombies Chronicles and all the other maps from BO3 coming to BO4, there's a lot that factor into that. So I personally don't ever see maps like Shadows, Dreisendrach, Zetsubo, Gorod, Rev. I don't see those maps coming to Black Ops 4 at all. Just the way the maps play on the original game, BO3, it just makes perfect sense. Story-wise, gameplay-wise, that would just break BO4 even further, make the game well over 200 gigabytes. There's just no way that would work. People out there might want that, to have every Black Ops Zombies map on one game, which to me makes sense also story-wise, because if 2020's Call of Duty reboots the Ether story, Treyarch would say, you know what, BO3 was one of our best games ever, but BO4 allowed us to essentially put every single zombie map we ever made into one game, so if you want to play the original Ether story, you have it all on one title, not two different ones. I could see that happening, but at the same time, it just, to have all those maps in one game, it would break so many things. Custom mutations, Rush, Gauntlet, possibly Grief and Turn. I'm assuming if they ever did that, it would kind of be downscaled a bit, right? You just have the base map and the base Easter egg. Nothing else, no Rush, no Gauntlets, nothing else besides that, in BO4. I would love for that to be the case, where you could see all these new game modes they've added in on the original BO3 maps. That would be great, but I just don't see that being very likely. But what I do think is possible is definitely porting over the first Zombies Chronicles to BO4. I think since those maps are pretty basic as they are, 4 of them are survival maps, 4 of them are Easter egg maps, I could see that working with the Elixir system, but again, with custom mutations, all these new game modes, I just don't see all of that working together. But maybe if they just ported the maps over, I guess it would be free if you own the first Zombies Chronicles. Maybe that would work to an extent, but again, just seems far too unlikely, especially at this point when Treyarch's budget was cut, their staff was essentially all put to the 2020 reboot, and the reboot in which apparently is not going very well behind the scenes. So I don't see them having any time just to do something like that and bring all those maps from BO3 over into BO4. But besides that, I also asked about Grief coming with the final operation, and he did say it's supposed to. Last time I heard, it was already tested and working with all the current maps. I then asked him, well, even Chaos? Because that's a bit strange, and he then responded by saying, I don't think it's story related this time. And I guess that makes sense because, Grief back in BO2 was technically canon. It was featured on the official Zombies timeline for the Ether story. Grief actually happened in the story. It wasn't just a gameplay thing. So maybe this time around it won't be necessarily canon to either story. It'll just be something added in there for gameplay purposes. As I've said before, not everything they add in to Call of Duty Zombies has to be canon to any story. Just put it in there from a gameplay perspective for fun. Just for people out there who play the game just to play the game, not to really listen and follow through with the story. He then came out and said they were supposed to come out and conclude the Chaos story for this game, but with the huge lack of funding, I'm not sure if they were completed fully. I asked them whether or not there was any word on the 2 other Chaos maps that are rumored to come in a now scrapped year 2 for Black Ops 4 Zombies. So again, along with funding and all the budget cuts and the staff being moved on to a 2020 reboot, which is currently not going very well behind the scenes, I don't see that also being something they add on to their agenda. Besides polishing BO4's final operation, polishing DLC 4 and 5, besides that, I don't see them working on anything special like porting over maps from BO3, adding in the first Chronicles, or finishing those 2 Chaos maps, which Activision looks at as a financial flop. And for all we know, Activision might say, you know what, we do care about the people who were interested in the Chaos story. Let's release or let's fund a couple of comics that finish off the Chaos story. Or maybe we will fund Chaos one day on a better game. Maybe Black Ops 4 was just too broken at launch with stability and errors and UI errors, all these different things, to the point where Chaos just couldn't hold itself and couldn't really, unravel its wonderful story in Greek mythology. Maybe it just was the wrong game to introduce Chaos on. So maybe one day they'll say, you know what, we'll give it another chance and see how it does. But right now, I just don't see that happening. But besides Chaos now, he went into a little bit of detail about the COD 2020 reboot and exactly what Ether Reboot means. When we bring it up in videos, I don't necessarily mean that we'll see new zombie maps in COD 2020 with the same Ultimates and Primus crews. I don't think that at all. I always thought that at the very least, you may have a cameo from Ultimates Richtofen or somebody from the Ether story that maybe hasn't appeared in a long time. But when it comes to Ultimates Richtofen, he sells games. There's no doubt about that. Nolan North's Richtofen character sells Black Ops Zombies games. Everybody knows that, along with the other characters as well, but especially him. So at the very least, maybe one day, if sales are down, you'll see him in the Ether reboot. But when it comes to the reboot itself, I really see this being an opportunity to explore the multiverse a little bit more, maybe during or before the events of BO3 and 4, and you'll see characters that maybe haven't been fleshed out enough, and you'll see them being the main characters in this reboot going forward. But the fact that it was leaked as an Ether reboot still means something. Even if it's a soft reboot or anything, still means that the previous Ether story does matter and all. People could still follow on with that story and continue with COD 2020, but for new people coming in, they won't necessarily have to read up on or play the original Ether story and maps to know what's going on in this new version of zombies in the Black Ops franchise reboot. And as I said also, Activision is doing exactly what they did with Modern Warfare and doing that with Black Ops. Rebooting the franchise with familiar faces and familiar characters, but going in a completely different direction story-wise and gameplay-wise, going to the roots of Call of Duty itself and going in a completely different area and a completely different spectrum when it comes to story. So essentially scrapping everything you know from the past about that series and going in a whole different side of things when it comes to the future of Call of Duty. And it seems with Modern Warfare, they're really building towards a new trilogy. As people like the Gaming Revolution have also leaked, according to their inside sources, they are planning for a new Modern Warfare trilogy. So you see a new Modern Warfare 2 and a new Modern Warfare 3. They're going to do the exact same thing with Black Ops. So here's what we had to say about the Black Ops reboot. I don't have a lot of details at the moment for next year's Call of Duty regarding zombies. What I was told is that even though they may say it's part of the Ether story, just from another multiverse perspective, it's going to have no connection whatsoever to the actual Ether, Agartha, and Element 115 aspects from our current story. They're still in very, very early works on a new story. I mean, there's no basis to the story yet. They only have a simplistic idea of what they want to achieve with it, but no concrete story written out. A lot of changes going on with Treyarch and the other studios, but Craig is still the main illustrator at the moment and has free reign to create a story he sees fit. So besides going into Blundell and whether or not he's still at Treyarch, I've gone over that before. Regardless of that, Craig Houston is still at the helm writing the next iteration of Zombies, which is still great news if this is true. Take it with a grain of salt, but fantastic news if this is true. I really hope that it is. So I think Craig Houston knows damn well not to just bring back characters that essentially close off their arcs in DLC 4 for Black Ops 4 Zombies. He's not going to be stupid with that, but as I said before, a quick theory is that DLC 4 sets up the reboot in the sense that the cycle is then reset where 115, Agartha, Gods, Keepers, all of that stuff doesn't exist. So in this reboot or this new version of Zombies, whoever it is that's the playable character, the test subjects, whoever that is, they'll wake up in a universe where there isn't any of that fantasy crap, none of that mythology, none of that Cthulhu, none of that, just good old classic zombies, possibly in a World War II era, but kind of on par with what World War II zombies did from Sledgehammer Games. Something similar to that level of realistic zombies, if that makes any sense there. But again, possibility, as things are still in early versions of development, you could easily see Ultimus Richtofen wake up in a universe where none of that fantasy stuff exists and only he exists, only he's overpowered, maybe he's in control of the zombies, who knows? Something like that could happen in the reboot, and then he'll be on the sidelines while a whole new story is taking place within the quote-unquote Ether multiverse. Something very simple like that could happen, and to support that, we have the direct words from Treyarch themselves, as they said that DLC 4 is the end of our cruise crews. We have Primus, Ultimus, and Victus. And obviously, Victus will still get some more exploration within DLC 5, but it's filling in a gap. The actual end of the Ether is still DLC 4, so it'll be the end of those crews. But as they worded in there, there's always room to tell stories within the big multiverse of the Ether storyline. So that right there is just perfect proof that they're never going to be done with Ether necessarily. I think they know Chaos couldn't hold its own weight, so maybe another story couldn't either, regardless of what engine it's on, regardless of what Call of Duty it's in. They just know it has to be somehow Ether related. Probably Activision came up to them and said, you know what, no matter what you guys do, tell a good story, but still somehow make connect to the Ether in some way so that it sells season passes, it sells games, gets people playing all year long, and I think Treyarch knows that now. So that's kind of the end here of what this new person had to tell me about some updates in regards to DLC 4, 5, and the Call of Duty 2020 reboot. That is about it. This has been dkdynamite. Leave all thoughts down below in the comment section. Once again, as a final reminder, none of this is concrete. None of this is coming from an absolutely reliable source who's been right about everything in the past. I have had videos here on the channel bringing you info from people who have been right about everything in the past, but in terms of this content today in this video, it's coming from somebody new who I don't know whether or not is reliable or not, but we'll definitely find out when DLC 4 does roll around to line up this potential release date he's giving me here on Twitter. But that is about it. Leave all your thoughts down below, and peace out, everyone.